In August 2005, the close to 500,000 residents of New Orleans knew all hell was about to break loose.
I urge all citizens to put their own safety and the safety of their families first by moving to safe ground.
A monster named Hurricane Katrina was tearing across the Gulf of Mexico. The Category 5 hurricane, packing winds of nearly 175 miles per hour, was bearing down on the city and was predicted to make landfall after dark. As expected, Katrina pounded the Louisiana coastline. However, after it made landfall, it was downgraded to a Category 4 storm with winds of less than 150 miles per hour. And the eye of the hurricane veered northeast, away from the city.
At the last second, it made this little turn, and we're all so excited. It's like, no, we're not going to get the brunt of the storm. New Orleans is going to make it. We're going to make it.
Celebrations would prove to be short-lived. By missing the city, Katrina's ferocious winds, moving in a counterclockwise pattern over Lake Pontchartrain to the north and the Gulf of Mexico to the east, sent an estimated 15-foot storm surge into the city through its backdoor drainage canal system.
Storm surge is the swell of water caused by the hurricane winds, and it raises the water level, so it's as though it's a high tide that is enormously high and just comes in fast.
Only the levees and floodwalls could protect the city from the impending catastrophe. But in a series of engineering disasters, the levees failed on a massive scale.
Once the breach occurred, there was a wall of water released, like a tsunami, that flowed into this residential area.
First, a levee floodwall broke along the Industrial Canal waterway on the city's east side. Storm surge water rushed through the breach into an area known as the Ninth Ward.
I heard a loud boom, explosion, like boom. The water was so powerful that I know something was wrong, because there ain't no way in the world that much pressure of water is supposed to be coming.
Then a second flood wall on top of the 17th Street Canal levee suffered a 2-city-block-wide breach. This allowed the water of Lake Pontchartrain to run into the city. Then a third levee floodwall collapsed along the London Avenue Canal.
And you can clearly see how the walls come down, and the water just kind of pushed over it.
These levees and floodwall breaks put more than 80% of Orleans Parish underwater. Thousands of victims were left stranded.
We are dealing with one of the worst natural disasters in our nation's history.
With the city submerged, New Orleans' system of mammoth water pumps, used for more than 80 years to drain the city, was of little use.
Our biggest problem was water. Water rolled into the station, rolled across the floor. The power had to be cut to them. Water rose to this height right here. That's it. Our pumps are shut down. We're dead in the water. We're decommissioned. No more pumping.
But the flooding wasn't the only disaster Katrina visited upon New Orleans. Despite evacuations, up to 25,000 residents remained in the city. Many fled to the Louisiana Superdome, a structure built on higher ground and supposedly engineered to withstand hurricane-force winds. However, most of its roof was ripped apart during the storm.
It was quite devastating to the dome itself. It was a horrible environment to be in a space with a number of holes in the roof, water entering, no electricity, the plumbing systems beginning to back up, all as a result of these tremendous wind pressures on the roof structure itself.
Thousands were rescued from high water, many from rooftops. Getting relief to victims became extraordinarily difficult. In another engineering disaster, a main route into the city, the Interstate 10 twin-span bridge, collapsed as a result of the storm's massive water surge.
This is what the bridge looked like before Katrina. When this powerful storm came through, it just devastated the bridge. And you can see right here that there's nothing left of these 265-ton concrete segments.
The city was left with no power, scarce drinking water, dwindling food supplies, and incidents of looting.
Hey, drop!
Up to 1,300 victims did not survive. New Orleans looked like a third world country.
It was really an apocalyptic event for the city to flood and fires to break out in the water and people to be trapped in their homes. The collapse of civilization seeming to be imminent.
Why had New Orleans been so vulnerable? A shocked nation began to look for answers.
The mystery that we're trying to uncover in terms of the engineering performance of the design is what caused the variety of failures that we saw. Was it a strong hurricane or a weak design?
An army of scientists, geologists, and engineers descended on the crippled city to unlock this mystery. One of the so-called geodetectives was Dr. Joseph Suhayda, an oceanographer, geotechnical coastal engineer, and former professor at Louisiana State University.
Right after the storm hit, I investigated the causes for some of the breaches and flood wall failures that occurred. We had to do this immediately after the storm before any evidence would be erased by either repairs or some natural processes that would obscure what we were trying to look at.
Dr. Suhayda reached the scene without a moment to spare. The Army Corps of Engineers was rapidly repairing the levee and floodwall breaks to protect against further storms, which could strike during the remainder of what would turn out to be an extremely active hurricane season.
There were a lot of unknown factors in terms of the levee breaches. And so we had to look into the factors that would explain why they failed under conditions that would appear that they should not have failed under.
In fact, the engineering failures may have been over 300 years in the making. Beginning when the French arrived at the end of the 17th century. The first settlers found a swampy area they called Le Flottant, the floating land. The soil on which New Orleans was built is naturally very wet, even spongy, and consists of silt carried from the Mississippi River. The city is mostly surrounded by water. Only parts of New Orleans are a few feet above sea level. Most of it is either at or 10 feet below sea level.
The topography has been likened to a soup bowl because the front, the river end, is high of the rim, and the middle is low, like the bottom of a bowl.
Before it was known as the Big Easy, New Orleans was named the Crescent City. The French first built on the crescent-shaped high elevation along the Mississippi River. This is where the famous French Quarter is now located. From the beginning, the French had problems with flooding from the Mississippi River. So they began to build a system of levees. A levee is an earthen dam that runs along a waterway.
The levee system goes literally to the founding of New Orleans. I would say at the very, very latest, 1720, and possibly 1718.
After the Louisiana Purchase in 1803, the United States took control of the city. As it grew, the swampland below sea level was converted into farmland. During the next 100 years, some 350 miles of levees were built to protect this new land.
Individual landowners, plantation owners, were responsible for building and maintaining the levees. So it was a very private-based, non-governmental type of action.
The dirt that comprises the base of the levees is that soft, spongy Mississippi Delta soil.
What we have here is an example of a delta soil in terms of its characteristics of having high organic content, being very, very weak, having high clay content.
In 1927, the United States Army Corps of Engineers took control of the levee system. The Corps widened many of the levees and built them higher. But as the system was strengthened, there was another problem.
New Orleans and the metropolitan area is sinking because of the geology of the soils beneath the city. The water that's in the material is being squeezed out, and so the surface has been moving down and will continue to move down for hundreds of years.
This sinking is known as subsidence. It's caused by the reclaiming of swampland. When water and mud were pumped out, the area